Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I'm a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, and this is Pints with Aquinas. In this episode, I thought that we could talk about tattoos, specifically like whether you should get a tattoo or whether you should not get a tattoo. And, to be honest, I don't really care too much. I don't think that it's the type of thing that bears significant moral weight, but in thinking about it recently, I guess I would gently discourage you. What will that amount to? Probably not too terribly much. So, I figured that we could just take the time to think a little bit about the issue, to suss out some arguments, maybe cite some examples, and see where it leads us. So, here we go. All right, so from the outset, I should say this. I don't think that tattooing on its own terms is moral. In the way that, I don't think that the emotions on their own terms are moral. There's something that can be incorporated into your moral life. There's something that can become part of your moral culture, but taken at face value, it's just it's just tattoo. You just picked a piece of straw up off the ground. You turned left at the street light. It's a thing, right? But insofar as you as a human being do so for good or evil ends, and insofar as you bring your human life to bear on this moral object, then yeah, okay, it can take on a moral shape or it can take on a moral color. So I guess, yeah, I just don't think the stakes are too terribly high. If we were talking about lying, I'd be like, yeah, forbidden. If we were talking about murder, if we were talking about apostasy, if we were talking about adultery, then those things, by their very nature, are the types of things that we as Christians can't do. But tattooing, I think it's different. But, some people will probably disagree with me on that. Some people are like, you must get a tattoo. Or some people are like, you oughtn't get a tattoo for any reason under the sun. But I'm going to drive kind of like a middle course. You could, you couldn't. And again, like I said, this is going to amount to gentle discouragement. And I think the reason for which is, I've just noticed recently a lot of tattoos. It's still a little bit transgressive, but I think it's become more mainstream, and as a result of which it's become destigmatized. So I think it's a good time for us as Christians to at least think about the question a little bit. Because oftentimes, rather than thinking about tattooing in se, we just skip over to the next question, which tattoo will I get? And then that's just a different line of inquiry. So this is just to back it up and then take it on those terms. So like I said, I'm just going to give a couple sketchy arguments. They're half formulated. They're still provisional. They're not going to be super satisfying, but that's okay. Just kind of thinking out loud, and then we can continue the conversation in the comment section. And then I'll give a couple of examples, and then we can wrap up with some summary points. So here we go. All right. These are my various reasons, offered by way of discouragement, mild discouragement. All right, so I would observe first that tattooing seems to be mildly addictive. And by mildly, I mean very. You often hear people say, for my next tattoo. It's okay. And you'll often hear people say, they'll build in backstops. I got this one and that one, the other one, but I'm only going to do one sleeve, or I'm only going to do sleeves, or it's not going to get above this line on my neck. So people are conscious of the fact that left to its own logic, tattooing just keeps going, okay? Like Birdman style. So I think that should raise certain concerns. Do I think that it's bad because it can be addictive? No. I mean, chocolate chip cookies can be addictive. I don't think that they're bad. But I think that it should give us pause, because I think it's hard just to get one. And a lot of people, for their first one, they say, I'm just going to get one. And then that tune changes, and then it's for my second one, but I won't get three, and then unto ages of ages. So that's just one thing. All right. The second thing is tattoos often tend to be narcissistic. Not always, right? I'm not calling you a narcissist if you have a tattoo. I'm just saying that a lot of tattoos that I have seen have a kind of narcissistic slant. They're like a rarefied form of self-expression. And the reason for which is I think that they're often self-conceived and self-promulgated. It's like you're choosing the meaning of your life, all right? And then you're branding it on yourself, right? Or you're, emblazoning it upon yourself. And I think that, a typical kind of human, or more broadly, Christian understanding is that we receive our identity, we receive our mission, we receive our name, etc. from another, and that's something that we come into possession of. So your parents gave you your name, your baptismal name, your kind of patron saint, as it were. And mind you chose your confirmation saint, but yeah, what is another example? Nicknames, for instance. If you give yourself your own nickname, your high school classmates are going to be like, you're weird, man. It's we give you your nickname, and then you have to deal with it for the rest of our time here. So I think that there's something about tattooing where it's you're trying to say something about yourself. You're trying to sum up your own life and then put it out there. But it feels like, I don't know, it feels strange to me that we would do that. Now, do I think that we can't do that in any way, shape, or form? No. Again, pump the brakes. I'm not saying that this is a strict argument, a demonstrative proof. I'm just saying it just strikes me as a little weird. All right, that's it. There's also, I think, a certain tendency with tattooing. There's an attempt to try to encapsulate or to summarize your life. Okay, it's like an attempt to say, like, this is who I am, or this is what I'm for, which, again, a kind of noble desire. But I think that tends to take the whole of our lives. Now, mind you, do I think that we are completely lost or completely at sea as to the meaning of who we are and what we're for up until the moment of our last breath? No. But I think that we gradually come into possession of it. All right. And especially given the nature of, human beings who are weak and who are wounded, with a seemingly infinite capacity for self-deception. I don't know that we're always going to get it right when we try to say something that is perennially true, or when we try to say something that really gets to the heart of who I am and what I'm for. And sometimes the failure to grasp that can be regrettable. And if you see people with tattoos who subsequently converted to the faith, right, that's obvious. Okay. So the other thing is, with respect to tattoos are trying to say something, but I'm not always sure that they succeed in saying the thing that they seek to say, and that they might actually distract from what is actually being said in our life. All right, so I think that, I say this often, that our life has a kind of twofold character to it. One, we live our lives, and two, we interpret our lives. And part of living our lives is, in fact, interpreting our lives. But we get better at living, we get better at interpreting, please God, as we grow in the life of grace, virtue, gifts of the Holy Spirit, etc. But sometimes when you try to, fix a point on that timeline and say, this is what it's about, sometimes it's just not right. Right? It's like reading Anna Karenina, and at page 207, as Anna leaves Karenina and goes to shack up with her new friend, it's like, yes, this book is about love. It's like, well, keep reading. It's actually about jumping in front of trains. Sorry, that was dark. I mean, it's hard to fix a point, and it need not end tragically. But I think it's hard to fix a point, and as a result, sometimes we don't say what we intend to say when we try to say it. Say. And so I think overall, I kind of doubt the usefulness, or I doubt the efficacy of tattoos as manifestation and as communication of the person. Okay, again, at this point, if you have a tattoo, if you're thinking about getting a tattoo, you're probably mad at me, which is fine. I deserve to be mad at, but for a variety of reasons. I would say, again, I don't think that these are strict demonstrative proofs. I'm kind of working my way through these. And again, I don't think that it matters too terribly much. I'm just offering you these various arguments by way of mild discouragement. Okay, so now I'm going to give a couple of examples, fictional examples, and just suss out some of the details. Okay, so here are two tattoos that I might get that I won't get. Say that I get my mom's birth and death date, so the most significant person in my life who has died. All right, and so I would want to memorialize that. I would want to recall that. I would want to abide in that truth, insofar as it's a truth that is very, very pertinent. That's very, very important to me. All right, so I think it escapes a lot of the arguments that I said before. So it's about someone else. Well, maybe I want people to know that I had a mom, that my mom died, that was significant for me, so that way they know me as one who had a mom, which mom died, and yada, yada. So that you can get all convoluted there, but don't worry about that. All right, so it's about somebody else. It seems perennially important insofar as she will always be my mom, and I will always be her son. And that's a very significant part of my identity and my mission, okay? And also, it'd be a very modest and simple thing, like RCP, and then birth date, death date. Okay. So I think here, it's a good gesture insofar as it's about another whom you love. It's a testimony of love. It's the type of thing that you do because you don't want to forget, because you want to bear out her legacy, et cetera, et cetera. But what I would say by way of response, again, simple response, is that it seems kind of unnecessary, right? Fine. Get a tattoo. It's fine. It just doesn't matter too terribly much. But I don't think it's entirely necessary. For instance, I think that I am already tattooed by clear, manifest, communicable evidence of my mom, right? I am the fruit of her love, just full stop. I am 100% the fruit of my mom's love. Bingo. But also, I am tattooed, metaphorically speaking. My body and soul are tattooed with her likeness, with her personality. I have her smile. I have her love of travel. I have, I have any number of things that give testimony to my mom in my life. So I think I bear her already, and I bear her, in very real ways. They're not real because people don't immediately draw the connection. I haven't appealed to them by birth date and death date so that they're yes, Like it doesn't need to be an epitaph. It can be a living sign, okay? And also, if I fear forgetting, then I think that I need to address that fear in another way. I think that I need to address that fear more radically, okay? Like, like look at photos, watch videos of my mom, talk to my mom, pray to my mom. There's a Dominican sister recently who told me, that one of the best pieces of advice that she received from the sister superior of her congregation was don't stop talking to your parents, even after they pass. Don't stop talking to them, because it's very significant. Those relationships are super, super significant, and they continue to shape us. They continue to form us, even after our parents have passed. So I could do that, but like I said, it seems unnecessary because I already am stamped with it, and the things that I would want to accomplish by the tattoo, it seems like I can do in more human ways, all right? I can do in more kind of rich and significant ways. Okay, so that's one. All right, second one. Second and final one. I could get some religious image tattooed on my body, okay? So I could get some cross or a mediatrix or a quotation from sacred scripture. Cool, all right? Again, seems like a good enough thing. It's about the Lord. It's perennially important. Again, it's kind of modest and simple. And I think it's good to want to witness to the faith and to commemorate that belief in a bodily fashion. So we should want to bear in our bodies the wounds of Christ, all right, to make up for what is lacking in his suffering. But my response, I would say this, that we're made to the image and likeness of God principally by virtue of the fact that we have a mind with which to know and a heart with which to love. All right, so it's an interior thing. And I think that holiness is a secret between you and the Lord. Not that you should, never share, aspects of your faith life with other people. But I don't think that you would, cultivate these aspects of your faith life principally so that they can be shared, because then that would be to instrumentalize them. That would be to trivialize them. I think holiness is this secret. And another thing is, when it comes to tattooing, it's a static reality. Like I said, you just do it and then it's done and then that's that. It's a static reality unless you gain weight or lose weight or unless it loses color or whatever. Whereas our testifying to, our memorializing the Lord in our flesh is principally a dynamic reality, right? So we are made to the image and likeness of God, mind with which to know, heart with which to love, and they're further up and further in, kind of driven towards, tending towards the very heart of Trinitarian communion. So yeah, we have these capacities, but these capacities are for activities, and the activities are ultimately trained on the reality itself into which we seek to be, kind of bound up. Or included, or what would one say, deified, okay? So I think that there's something about tattooing that's a little bit dead, that's a little bit lifeless, which I think, not that it has us settle for something less than the best, but because it's not like we're doing it as a replacement for, but I think that the best is a more difficult reality. It's a harder thing to lay hold of. It's harder to grapple with, but I think that part of its difficulty is part of its charm. It's part of its excellence. And we have ways by which to memorialize our witness in our flesh, in our bodies. The principal way is worship, okay? So when St. Thomas talks about religion, he says 2 interior acts, devotion, whereby we give our hearts, and prayer, whereby we give our minds, all right? And that those interior acts are told forth, they're manifested and communicated by exterior acts, the purpose of which is to show what's going on inside, but also to stir up further what's going on inside. And because we owe God the body, okay? He has this cool little thing where he gives 3 reasons about why we pray vocally. He says, it testifies to what's going on within. It stirs up further the devotion that we seek to cultivate in our heart. And God gave you the voice, so give it back. So I think that this kind of movement of worship is the way in which we are made, principally and primarily, to tell forth the glory of God in our bodies, okay? So that requires of us a kind of continual effort, a continual dynamism, a living of the image of God in its full, depth, breadth, height, grandeur, all right? So, again, I've gotten a little bit stirred up, which seems to suggest that I feel very strongly about tattooing. I don't. I just get stirred up about everything. If we don't, go ahead and talk about some movie that I watched 2 nights ago, I will probably get stirred up about that too. So again, if you're I have a tattoo or I'm thinking about getting a tattoo and I'm starting to get offended by this man, don't worry, okay? Again, I don't think it matters too terribly much, but this is me just thinking about the theological principles and then seeing if we can suss out some conclusions from them. All right, so to bring it all home, summary points. I think that, tattoos, whether you get them, whether you don't, doesn't matter too terribly much. What we know about tattoos is that they will age, right? If you've ever seen a World War II veteran, you know that they will age. I suppose a lot of those are stick and poke tattoos, so they're not gonna hold up too terribly well. But even still, the color fades, our body grows or it waxes or wanes, whatever. All right, so the significance of that tattoo will probably pass, or at the very least, it will change. And I think that, for those of us with certain ironic sensibilities, it's hard to see that, right? It's hard to look back at who you once were. It's like looking at high school poetry, because it's a kind of reminder of what we were and what God has done subsequently, but with a little bit of a desire to distance ourselves from what we once thought important. Okay, does that need to be healed? Does that need to be grown beyond? It does indeed. But I think that we should always leave ourselves room to grow. And, room to grow whilst being committed, but committed to the things that really matter, right? We have sufficient commitments in our life to keep ourselves grounded with family, with friends, with marriage, with religious life, with orders, with whatever. Okay, and we don't need to make further commitments of a different sort just because what? Because those things are kind of coming to pieces, or because those things may or may not be disintegrating. So I think it's for us to hold fast to the commitments of a more thick sort. And final thought, Christ, when he wrote a law, he didn't write it on paper. He didn't write it on skin. He wrote it on hearts. All right, and St. Thomas has a cool little article dedicated to just this point, why our Lord, when he wrote the evangelical law, he didn't write it out in a book. He said because his teaching is more noble, all right, and he seeks to communicate it in a more noble way, and he addresses it to the most noble thing in our lives, which is to say, to the image and likeness of God at work within, right? So, it's a noble teaching. It seeks to achieve a noble goal, and he does it nobly. And so, there's something about that, this idea that holiness is a mystery, that holiness is a secret. And now you're probably thinking of all kinds of counter arguments or all kinds of objection, but should I not then wear whatever, a crucifix around my neck? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that with respect to tattooing, I'm worried about some of the fears or some of the anxieties that underwrite it, or maybe some of the half-formulated or not yet perfect desires, which can be expressed through other avenues of a more typical sort, which will, perhaps, address more adequately the desire that we have for doing something with our lives that matters. At the end of the day, you're already marked, okay? You're marked at your baptism by baptismal character. The image that St. Augustine uses to explain baptismal character is actually the tattoo that Roman legionaries received when they were, inducted into the army, which is to say they got a tattoo on the back of their hand that said SPQR, Senatusque Populus, no, it's SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romana, Senatus Romanus. Man, I am just losing it, Romani. There you go. And what that tattoo would assure was when they decorated themselves in glory, that they would be known as a member of the legion. But also, when they abandoned, they would be known as one who formerly pertained to a glorious thing. So whether for glory or for shame, it was there. They were marked. And I think, too, by virtue of our baptism, we have this character. We have this participation in the priesthood of Christ, whereby we can worship and tell forth the glory of God for the salvation of souls. And whether for ill or for good, whether for good or for ill, right? It's there. It's already present in our body and in our flesh. So, those are some thoughts. Those are some sketches of arguments. Those are some beginnings of debates, and I hope that they can proceed in the comment section. Fruitfully. Is it possible to have a fruitful conversation in the comment section? Well, we'll find out. Here we go. All right, so that's all I have for you. This is Pints with Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel, push the bell, get email updates when other videos come out. And then I contribute to a podcast called Godsplaining with 4 other Dominican friars, which is great, and you should check that out as well. So please do subscribe on YouTube and on your podcast app. So for weekly episodes and then some. And then I wrote a book. It's called Prudence. Choose confidently, live boldly. If you want to hear more about making moral acts, although there's nothing in there about tattoos, you can read that book. So you can find it wherever books are sold, Amazon, OSV's website, and others besides. Boom. All right. My prayers are for you. Please pray for me. I'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Pints with Aquinas. Cheers.